All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. This is my first time doing a conference talk on a virtual conference platform. So I successfully went through all of last year without doing that. So excited to give this a try, see how it works. I like obviously being able to see folks and get an idea of kind of their reactions to things. And I'm less of a PowerPoint or keynote sort of person, but I think I have some kind of fun examples in here that I want to go through. So. At a high level, I want to talk about, and we're not going to get super in depth with things today, but at a high level, I want to talk about when it comes to building software and how I think about software and that sort of thing. And I want to use software that has a personality. And I want to give you some ideas on how others are using personality within their software. And personality doesn't just mean be fun or other things like that. It can mean a variety of things. And so we'll dive a little bit into that. And just for a little context, I'm Derek Homann. I'm the co-founder and chief customer officer at Workshop. And let's see if my slides want to go there. There you go. A little bit of context on me. Like I said, co-founder and chief customer officer at Workshop. And Workshop, for a little context, is a company I run with three other business partners, Dusty Davidson, Rick Knudsen, who previously started Flywheel here in Omaha, and Ben Stevenson, who I worked with previously at my previous company. And we build internal communication software and work with a variety of companies, both locally and across the country, and officially launched earlier this year. So been working on Workshop for a while. Prior to that, myself and Ben, one of the other founders of Workshop, started a company called Median, which made co-browsing software specifically for customer support professionals. And we successfully ran that and then sold it in October of 2020. And then prior to that, I worked for a couple of companies that you may have heard of, both locally and nationally and internationally, I guess. So I ran customer support at Flywheel before that, which is where I met Ben and Rick and Dusty, who are all working on Workshop with me currently. And then before that, I spent 8 years at LinkedIn. I was an early LinkedIn employee here in the Omaha office from 2008 through 2016. So I've kind of been in the space of working with software for a while, and have seen kind of a lot of different iterations of software from kind of 2007, 2008-ish through today. So and I want to talk a little bit about what it means for software to have personality, because I think, in some ways I kind of use it as a little bit of a cutesy title, but I think, and I think most people want to use software that is fun to use or easy to use or a variety of different things. And I'll first start off by saying that I am not a designer. I'm not an engineer. I don't write code. I don't bust open Photoshop, nor do you want me to. I'm very poor at both of those things. I think it's been probably 7 or 8 years since I last wrote a line of code, and even then it was really, really bad. And so I want to caveat that with saying, some of the things I'll talk about here are kind of engineering related or design related, but not necessarily from the perspective of an engineer or designer myself. So I'll run through that, but I want to caveat that, and by no means am I an expert when it comes to those two things. So, but I have been around that for a while. So I like this quote here in particular. And so Alan Cooper, who's has done a bunch of things with software, and I think was one of the inventors of Visual Basic, if I remember correctly, back in the day. He said, if we want users to like our software, we should design it to behave like a likable person. And I really like this quote for a variety of reasons, because one, it fit really well with the topic of my talk. I found this after I came up with the topic, but it actually encompasses exactly how I think software should be built and how it should be used. Because in reality, the personality of a person and how we interact with software isn't actually so different. And so I naturally then Googled who is the most likable person in the world, and it turns out, according to Google, it is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think a lot of people like The Rock, but I think you'll have some similarities here. I just thought it was funny because apparently there's like a real answer to this, and so when I Google this, I was like, oh, like there's the most likable person in the world. There's attributes of the person who's the most likable person in the world, and I think there's some correlations you can make to building software. And so we'll talk about what uh, some of those traits are. And actually, this is how I think about it when it comes to personality traits. You got to have apparently The Rock on here as well because he's the most likable person in the world. So when we talk about uh, you know personality when it comes to software, um, personality doesn't like software tends to have a personality regardless of whether you want it to or not, and some of that's good and some of that's bad. And so I'm just going to walk through mostly the rest of the talk is mostly walking through the personality traits that both people have and that software has and how I see it. I'd say some of the stuff's kind of up for interpretation how you actually see it, but I kind of put these things in these categories. I've been thinking about this for a long time of the software that I like to use and the software that I don't like to use, and why is it that I like it and why is it that I don't like it. And so, and we'll kind of run through this. And for context, in Dwayne Johnson's early days when he was, part of the WWE, he actually both played a good, kind of good cop and bad cop. So, he both had these personality traits at different times in his acting and wrestling career. So, we'll start off with the kind of the bad stuff, the sneaky, deceitful, unfriendly, before we kind of jump into what I'd say is more of the fun stuff. So let's take a look. So sneaky and deceitful, I think there's an okay amount of companies that fall into this category. And you kind of know it when you see it. When you interact with software and it doesn't do what you expect it to do, or you go through some workflow or something like that, and at the very end of it, all of a sudden you found out that you were signed up for some marketing material that you didn't expect. It wasn't clear, or you are checking out at on an e-commerce website, and all of a sudden there's like 5 other things in your cart that you're like, I didn't put that in there. So those are things that I think are interesting. And so I'll talk a little bit about what some of those are. So I previously worked at LinkedIn. This is no longer the case at LinkedIn, but I'm going to use an example. When I ran some of the customer support team there, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I can say this now, is I've been away long enough, and all this stuff has been changed since then, partially due to customer complaints, partially due to internal champions fighting for these sorts of things. But this is a good example of what I'd call a dark pattern. And so if you Google like what a dark pattern is, it's basically tricking you into doing some action that you wouldn't normally do. And so when early on, when you would log into LinkedIn and you would join for the very first time, one of the very first things it did before you were doing anything was it would ask you for your email address, or if you were using a different email address, it would ask you to add additional email addresses. And so it would have something like this here, and it would ask you to import your address book. And so this case it says, we'll import your address book to suggest connections and help manage your contacts. And so this is like, oh, like it's helping suggest connections. It's interesting. It's helping me like get connected. Like that seems like a good action to take. And so naturally, you're just going to click the button. And like if you notice the link that's over in the right hand side is gray and much smaller, and the continue button's big and blue, and naturally you just want to click on it. And here's where it would take you. This is the next page. And so it would drop you on this page. It says, pick up where you left off. And it would say, stay in touch with your contacts we found. People aren't reading this anyway, by the way, like that text, like they don't tend to read it. They just kind of see and tend to go to the big shiny button. But it'll say, stay in touch with your contacts we found in your address book. Invite them to LinkedIn so they can connect with you. And by default, it would select all. And if you look on this page, I think there's something like 10 or 12 contacts that it shows. And what it would do, when you hit add to network, it would send an invite out to all of those people. And for those of you who don't know or haven't interacted with an address book importer, it pulls, in many cases, anyone you've ever emailed ever, whether it's somebody you're buying something from on Craigslist or a variety of other things. So you look at this and you're like, oh, here's 12 people. Like some of these people seem legit or not legit. You might uncheck 2 or 3 of these and say, okay, I'm good to go, and hit add to network. But it shows 10, there it goes, it shows 10 contacts, and you want to hit that add to network. But what you don't really see, and what doesn't come to your mind, because there's kind of a lot of stuff going on this page, is that there's actually 688 connections here. So if you look really closely on the side here, you can see that you can scroll, and then it's going to show there's 688. There's no kind of visual cue that this list keeps going. It conveniently gets cut off right at 10. And so more often than not, people would hit the add to network button, and it would invite 688 people, many of which you had no idea who they were, people that you haven't talked to in years, or things like that. And so it was just a bad first experience. Now, it was good, I guess, to get as many people on the platform as possible, because you would, send an invite, and it would say that, John Doe is inviting you to join their network, but it wasn't a good user experience. That's sneaky and that's deceitful, and it's just not the right way to do things. It may give you, kind of short-term gains, but it certainly isn't going to give you, brand credibility. It's certainly not the type of software, not kind of the personality that you want to hang out with. If you're a person and somebody you hang out with is sneaky or deceitful, you're probably not going to keep hanging out with them. So that's just not something that I would encourage people to do. So that's an example of something sneaky or deceitful. There's a bunch of these sorts of things. I would say if you Google dark patterns, there's a website, I think it's like darkpatterns.net or .com or something like that, and you can see a list of all these. And a lot of airlines fall into things like that, and other things like that. So that's just an example. Another personality trait that software can have that you don't want is unfriendly. And I would say unfriendly is interesting. And this is, again, a little up for interpretation. But when I think of unfriendly software, I think of things that are just not user friendly, right? So this is an example of a piece of software I used in a previous life, not that many years ago. And so what that actually means is, there you go, dark patterns for Colleen, who just asked that question there. And so what that means by unfriendly is, I'm going to land on this page, and unless somebody has trained me like it really well, I have no idea what I'm doing on this page at all. There's so much going on. If you look at the number of places that I can click on this page, it is crazy. Like there's no thought that's going into how is a user going to behave when they're on this page, and what is kind of like the normal workflow that they would go through. Yes, there's lots of things that you can do, but what's the normal thing that somebody does when they come to this page? Rather than do that, they just said, we're going to give you every option under the sun. You kind of figure out where to go from here. But if you were to say, where do I actually go to do any work on this page or take any actions, it'd be really difficult to figure out how to do your job without some kind of intense level of training. And certainly that's just not something that in today's world of kind of more competitive software industry is like, you can't just like allow somebody to use a piece of software like this and just get frustrated and like give up. You have to compete with more friendly software. So this unfriendly software becomes really difficult because you then run into the problem where, I counted all these, by the way. You run into the problem where you just don't know what to do. On this page alone, there are 63 buttons or links that can be clicked. So every single thing up here can be clicked. That's 63 different places that you could go. The reality is that you need, on an average day, 1 or 2 of those things that you have. This is a product by Oracle, by the way. Oracle hasn't historically been known for the great product design, or in this case, what I would say is bringing a great personality to a lot of their software products. And this too, like I said, there's 63 different places to click. That's not including the links that are all listed. All of those links right here that are on the right hand side in that blue, that's not including those. That's not including submenus. So a lot of these places that you can click over here, or these buttons up top here, have submenus, and that just is like not a piece of software that you want to interact with. It's just hard and confusing. You can even get fully trained on it, and then you go sit there and you go back in front of your computer and like, there's just so much to learn, I still don't know. And the learning curve is just way too high. So I just think that's unfriendly. The people who are designing the software didn't think about it from the perspective of what's going to be useful for the consumer to use. They were thinking from the perspective of, oh, we need to check mark, having this feature or having this ability rather than and just throw it on there. It doesn't matter where, rather than figuring out what is the best use of space and time and things like that for the folks that are actually using it. So now I get into what I would say are the better attributes of software when it comes to personalities. Straightforward and direct as a person. Some of the favorite people that I've ever worked for were straightforward and direct. They knew when to be straightforward and direct, and they knew when to be a little more, hand-holdy, or give you a message in a little softer tone. But straightforward and direct is not bad. And oftentimes, straightforward and direct is exactly what you need, because the previous screenshot we showed was the exact opposite of straightforward and direct. And so I really like straightforward and direct when it makes sense. And so, the first example here is some of our local friends here at Breeze. If you go to meetbreeze.com, they sell disability insurance, but in a much more friendly way. So if anybody's ever purchased insurance before, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of you have to go to somebody's office. You have to fill out like all sorts of forms and things that you just don't fully understand unless somebody's there to help walk you through it. It's actually a really easy thing to be complicated. And there's just so many other things to distract you with these different things. And one of the things that I like about Breeze and our friends over there is that they make it very straightforward and very direct. And so, you go to their website before you even get logged into the actual product itself. There's a big button that says "Get my quote." So if you're coming here and you want to get disability insurance, the number one thing, if you don't have it already, is you probably want to get your quote. There's not a lot of other stuff going on here. Certainly, there's other things in the menu up there that you can click on or that sort of thing. But the call to action and what they want you to do too. I mean, they're a business; they're trying to make money. Is get a quote. And so if you're landing on this page, you're there for a reason. They're there to walk you through the process. And so once you do that, I just love this interaction here, because it becomes really easy to get really complicated with insurance. And these guys, and what they said were like, hey, all we know is if we can just walk you through one step at a time, rather than putting like a big form in front of you that has 10 or 20 or 30 different things that you need to fill in. If we can just put one thing in front of you at a time, you stay focused. There's literally nothing else on the screen other than a forward or back button, just in case you remember something or need to go forward or back. We do nothing else but just put the singular thing that you need to focus on in front of you. It's just a great win. So this is the very first thing that you log into, and you're like, what type of worker are you? And if you're W-2, you click the one on the left. If you're a business owner, you click the one in the middle. And if you're an independent contractor, 1099, or you freelance, you click the one on the right. It's pretty straightforward, and it's really hard to get confused there. It's at least as easy as possible for something that can be complicated like insurance. And so you click on that button, whichever one that applies to you, and then you go to the next question they have, and they're literally just walking you through those complicated forms that you get with your insurance agent. They're just making it simple, and not doing all of the other things, all of the other distracting things to do. And so I just really like this approach of straightforward, direct. It becomes easy. It's better for the consumer. It's better for, honestly, it's better for the businesses. And so somebody who's going through this experience, probably no one loves going out and buying insurance. But if you go through this process, you're like, man, that was painless. And the reason it was because of how straightforward and direct it was. So straightforward and direct from the perspective of personality trait when it comes to software. I love that. Doesn't always, there's certain cases where that becomes a lot more difficult. Certainly a little bit easier with something like that that's pretty straightforward when it comes to answering questions, but you may have to have a lot more functionality and that sort of thing. So this next personality trait that I really like, and actually works a little bit better if you have a little more complicated product, or a product that needs to do a lot of different things, is helpful. And so you all have those friends that are helpful. They'll go out of their way to make sure that you understand how to do something. They'll kind of walk you through it. And so I really like this concept here. And there's a couple of different ways for software to be helpful. And I think about it in a couple of different ways. I'll use these examples here. So some of you who've used software before may have seen these sorts of things where you log into a new piece of software. It's the very first time you're there. And before they even let you actually use the software, you log in here and it kind of darkens the background and it highlights one specific thing. It just says one thing on the page, and then it'll have a little kind of pop-up here that kind of explains what this thing is. And so it'll actually show, in this case, it shows you, this hire me button here. It'll actually show you, because like if you just log in for the first time, you may not. And so when you see hire me, you're like, oh, this is where you find what you want and what it means. You can see that this is step 1 of 6. And so before you even get started, software that is helpful and has that kind of personality trait, they think of things like this, which is to be able to walk you through the process. There's not necessarily someone there live, to walk you through the process, but how do you kind of recreate that helpfulness that would be there if a customer service agent were on the phone with you, or if a trainer at your work were to be training you on a new piece of software. Since you don't have the luxury of that, you want to be able to bring that to your customers. And so I love things like product tours that when people log in, the very first thing they see is kind of a couple of step-by-step instructions on how to use the product. It works really well for more complicated products, especially when you need to kind of walk through a couple of different scenarios and that sort of thing. I think it's really good. And there's a bunch of actual this product tours has actually become a product segment in and of itself. So if you are building software and you don't necessarily want to spend tons of extra time building out all of these little walkthroughs with code, there's a bunch of great products that do this. AppQs does this. Intercom has a feature called Product Tours, I believe it's called, that does this. Pendo does this. And there's a bunch of other ones out there. But if you look at like product tour software, it allows you to kind of like no code, plug and play, walking through people how to use your software. So I love this sort of thing. It's just really helpful and inviting as well. And so this is another example of a product tour. This is on, I think it's Airtable. And this kind of takes it a step further too. So not only does it open up a new window and kind of a new tab to show you how to use something, but it actually does, this is a GIF that'll show you, it actually shows you the action that you're taking. So not just a screenshot, it's actually interactive, because that's the reality of what you're doing, is that if you're using software, you're interacting with it. And so I really like this sort of product walkthrough as well, because it just kind of takes it another step further. So they show you, if you're customizing these fields, like how you actually do these things and how you can drag and drop these text or files or attachments in there. So I really like that. Product tours are very, very cool. So I certainly like that. And it certainly resonates really well with the helpful vibe. And then the next thing I like to is, depending on your product, and again, these aren't necessarily relevant to every single piece of software, but it's certainly things to think about. And what I like to think about are templates. So we're thinking about this with our product right now. A lot of people that are using Workshop are sending out announcements to people via text and SMS and Slack and Microsoft Teams, and they're scheduling those, and there are things that they send on a regular cadence, whether it's a weekly email from the CEO or things like that. And a lot of times people just don't know where to start. And certainly product tours help with that, but a lot of times it's just like, hey, like if you're a software company and you have people using your product, you probably have a number of good examples of people who've kind of been up and running and have been using the product for a while. You probably have a number of good examples of them and seeing things that they've done that have been successful. And so this screenshot is actually from pitch.com. Pitch.com is a PowerPoint and Keynote competitor. It's not what I use to make this template. I actually use Keynote, but I really like their layout here, and it looks nice, and so I dropped it in here. But this is a great example of like I signed up for Pitch and I hadn't used it yet, and I want to make something that looks good. And how do I get from being a brand new user to making something that looks nice and something that gets my point across right away? And so, like, if you just were to, have somebody drop on this page, you had no templates, and that you said create a presentation that was just a bunch of blank white slides. Certainly, some people will poke around and they'll get the hang of it and figure out how to use it. But if you give them kind of a pre-built thing with all the puzzle pieces, they're certainly a lot more likely to use the product in a way that allows them to learn faster, allows them to get value out of it faster, but also allows them to just like feel like there was thought put into how this product was built. And so anytime there's some way to be helpful upfront, again, I just really like that kind of personality trait of software, and templates are certainly one of them. And another example of templates too is Notion has a great example of this. And this actually kind of ties back to when I was talking about if you have existing customers that are using your product and have demonstrated success already, templates are a great way to do that if it makes sense in your product. It doesn't make sense for every product. It wouldn't have made sense for the insurance product, but it certainly does for a note-taking app. It certainly does for a PowerPoint alternative. And there are a variety of other things. We send out weekly messages and announcements, and so it certainly does for us. But I really like this as well. So if you're using Notion, Notion is a note-taking tool. It does a bunch of other stuff as well, but I'll boil it down to just that. But you sign up for Notion, and one of the things that they have kind of front and center is also a template gallery. And they kind of take it a step further as well, because they have a nice community of people who are using their product. So, they have a list of all of the templates they have. Right here, they actually have a link to share your template. So if you're like, hey, like I created my own meeting note template, or a one-on-one document, or how we track our goals for the quarter, and my team really likes it, and you're kind of a power user, you can share the wealth kind of with others. And so not only can you create templates, but if you have enough of a kind of a product following, you can create a community around people who are helpful as well. So, Notion, I think, has done a good job of building in helpfulness as a personality trait through the community that they build. And so, if that's hard to do, but if you can do that, certainly you can get a lot more done, both with your product, with your community, with your customers, than you ever could with just a team of 5 or 10 or 200 people. It doesn't really matter. You have a number of other people who are helping each other out, and there's software can be helpful to people, but it can never be as helpful as like an army of people who are trying to help you. So I really like templates as a strategy for helpfulness when it comes to a personality trait for software. So something to think about when you're building these sorts of things as well. And it certainly helps, get people more successful in a quicker way. So this is my last one. I think I got a couple of minutes here left. I know I'm the last talk of the day, so I'll try and wrap up a little bit early. But my favorite personality trait when it comes to software is fun. It's certainly not a necessity. Not every software needs to be fun. Not every software needs to, have like what I'd say is like unnecessary but kind of nice surprises as a part of it. But I certainly like it, and it's certainly the funnest one to talk about. So I'll show some examples here. One of my favorite things, and one of my favorite things is one of the things I'm about to show you. But it actually kind of starts with, there's areas of opportunity within every product that you just kind of know are annoying, and for technology limitations or for a variety of different reasons, it just has to happen that way. And so if you can kind of figure out a way to make those things a little bit more fun, the things that were not the greatest but you can't do a ton about, I like this as well. So I like to talk about this is having a little bit of fun while you wait. So we all know what it's like to sit on a loading screen that looks like this. So Netflix is a good example. There's nothing wrong with this. Netflix is loading, or you open a new app and it's loading. But it's like you go to that app or you go to that product because you want to use it right then. And sometimes it takes 2 seconds, and sometimes it takes 2 minutes. So it's not super fun, but it's necessary, right? There's a lot of engineering that's going on in the background. Like Netflix is literally sending HD videos to to space or whatever, and then back down to your TV, and that's a hard piece of engineering. And to have that happen instantaneously in 4K video and all that stuff is just some pretty impressive feats of engineering. So but as an end user, we want our stuff and we want it now. And so like sitting on the screen is super frustrating. But when you really think about it, the amount of things that are happening to deliver this 4K video to you instantaneously is crazy. I mean, heck, it was just a number of years ago when you wanted to watch a movie, and even Netflix, like Netflix is one of the best ways. Like you either had to drive to Blockbuster, RIP, or have Netflix mail you a DVD several days later. And so now we want everything now. And so you don't want to wait 2 minutes for it to load, or even 20 seconds. And so how do you make this a little bit more fun? This is a meh experience to me. It's totally fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. No one's gonna not use Netflix because their loading screen is just meh. But certainly there's certain fun ways to do it. Gusto is a payroll provider. Payroll is boring. I think it's a boring industry, but I use Gusto. And that's how we use to pay ourselves at our company. Is what I use at my last company, and their loading screen is this. I'm waiting to log in to run payroll or whatever. But instead of a circle that's just spinning, it's a little piggy bank with whatever this thing is in the back, just walking, and it's just like that's just unexpected and fun, and it's got some personality behind it. It doesn't it doesn't make the product it doesn't tick any more functionality boxes or anything like that, but certainly brings a little bit of delight to that. The very first time I logged into Gusto, I've already talked about Gusto to more people because of like fun little stuff like this than anything to do with the payroll product. I'm like, oh, like it's just like a really well designed product. Like it's thoughtful, like it's kind of fun to use. And then like people ask like, oh, so I just like log in and I can pay people, right? I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, they all do that, but I don't know. There's just like these little moments of delight that happen that I think certainly make things a little more fun. And so waiting to run payroll and seeing this little cute little pig guy walking is a fun thing. So that is a thumbs up for kind of personality like that within software. I really like that. It takes a little bit of extra effort, but I think if you're creative, there's other ways to do that if you don't have necessarily the ability to have an animator build all that sort of thing. There's just some other kind of fun stuff that I think you can do, and so you want to think about those sorts of things. And so not only do you want to think about things like that, which they're not super fun, but you can make the not fun parts of your software fun. But when users have accomplishments that are accomplished within your product, I think a lot of people are building software to help people do their job. And so when they do, especially when they kind of create milestones or achievements or that sort of thing, I really like that. So this is an example from Help Scout. Help Scout makes customer service software. Actually, a good example of other customer service software is the one I showed earlier that had 63 places you can click on the page and that sort of thing. It's a stark difference between looking at something like Help Scout and something like Oracle Service Cloud. But for example, when you're on the customer support team, like you're always shooting for inbox zero, and this goes for a lot of people that are using personal email or work email as well. The customer support team just kind of lives and breathes in their email client all day, whether it's Help Scout or Zendesk or whatever. And when they actually get to 0 emails in the inbox, that's a huge deal. And so on the personal or work side of things, I've seen Superhuman, who makes an email client. When you get to inbox 0, they kind of have this like majestic looking picture that kind of rotates in and out every day to kind of like celebrate that fact. On Help Scout side, they rotate between a bunch of these kind of cool little photos they did or little animations that they did, and it has a little like nice saying underneath it. Like it doesn't take any time to write majestic. You make customer support look easy. Keep up the good work. It was either going to say that, or it was going to say you have no emails left in your inbox. Something more boring, less personality. So when people like, if you actually look on Twitter and like type in Help Scout inbox 0, you see people sharing this. Like, they like to share these sorts of things because it's fun. They have a sense of accomplishment, and now somebody else is kind of like, the people who built the software are also recognizing that sense of accomplishment. So people will certainly like that sort of thing. And I think this is probably my last one, but this is Trello. Trello has a power up, which is something that's not on by default, but something you can add that I really liked. And this isn't the highest fidelity GIF, but it'll give you an idea of another kind of like what I'd say is like almost like a surprise and delight type of experience. And so when somebody moves something from in progress to complete, little confetti cannon shoots, and the confetti kind of like streams down the page. And it's really like this because like you're taking something that's like in progress and then you're completing it. That's like that's an accomplishment, right? Like that's the whole point of Trello is project management. And when you complete something in the project, you want to celebrate that. And so, certainly moving that tile over or that card or whatever they call them is, I guess, a good feeling. But how do you inject a little personality into it, a little bit of fun? And certainly doing things like this is one of the ways that you can do that. So I just really like that from the perspective of building software that's like fun to use, that people like to use, whether it's kind of direct or whatever. I would say, kind of as I wrap up here, I think this is the last slide. Most importantly, when you're building software, you got to build something that you yourself would enjoy using. And so software is there to solve a problem. And usually if it's a problem, it's something that like isn't necessarily always the funnest to do. And so if you can figure out a way to make that more fun or easier or more thoughtful for the person who's actually using the software, I think not only is it going to help your business, it's certainly going to help what people think about your company. I think I use the example of before starting Workshop in Median, myself and Ben worked alongside Dusty and Rick at Flywheel, and Flywheel is a hosting company, and traditionally hasn't been, hosting is traditionally kind of a boring, industry. So like no one is like, hosting is awesome. I mean, there's maybe a few people out there, but it's not actually about that. It's about building kind of these delightful experiences and thinking about it from the perspective of the person who's actually using the product, not just like kind of thinking about it, but like thinking about it in a holistic way. And so if you can look back and build software that you yourself would enjoy using, you're off on the right foot. And so that's how I think about it. Again, like I'm not a designer, I'm not an engineer, but certainly we weigh in very heavily with how our products are built and that sort of thing, because I'm working with a lot of our customers, both from the support side and the sales side. And when it also helps us. We're selling something and we show a little piece of the software that's just like a fun kind of surprise and delight thing. People like that stuff. It's just fun to use, and people like it. And so if you enjoy building it and you can think about yourself using it and think it would be fun, then customers probably can too. So most importantly, build software that you yourself would enjoy using. And so that's it for me. Here's my contact information. If anybody has questions or anything, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll hang out for another minute or two if I don't hear anything. Emails Derek@useworkshop.com. I like to think I'm very quick at returning emails, so feel free to drop me a note if you have any questions about this or have any questions about startups or tech, or in some ways we're early on with Workshop and working with a lot of internal communications teams and HR teams. So you always feel free to send referrals or potential employees our way too. You can find me on Twitter at @dhomann as well. So I'm semi-active on Twitter. I at least read through Twitter a lot. I don't post as much, but I certainly read through it a lot. So that is all I got. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be here for another minute or two. And like I said, feel free to reach out. I like hearing from people, and if this was helpful, let me know. Or if there's other people that I should talk to or anything like that, feel free to send them my way. And I see, by the way, I see in the chat, Adam mentioned that he's going to start on the support team, which is very cool. My wife still works at Flywheel, by the way. So Flywheel /WP Engine. So say hi to Jen Homann when you get there. She's on the engineering team. Cool. All right. Well, I think. Oh, Carl used to work with my wife at Allegiant. Oh, Allegiant. What is that? CHI Health. Now, I mentioned Allegiant the other day, and someone who didn't live here had no idea what Allegiant was. So I have to remember that it is CHI Health now. Cool. Well, that is a small world. I appreciate you popping in, Carl, and I appreciate the other folks who joined as well. So I will wrap up here in a second. I did see Adam just drop in one more question. So Adam asked, curious about Workshop. What's the idea behind the platform? So I didn't talk too much about Workshop. I don't want to be promotional or anything like that. But now that you've asked, I will. So Workshop, we build Workshop as an internal communications platform. We primarily focus on sending timely and important information to your employees. And so both through our time at Flywheel and through my time at LinkedIn, I was at LinkedIn when it was just 200 and something employees, and when I left, it was 9,000 employees. And we saw some, when we went to Flywheel, I saw some pretty fast growth there as well. And we started talking about what we wanted to do next after we sold, after Ben and I sold Median, and after we had been talking to Rick and Dusty about what we wanted to do next. We talked about this kind of common challenge that we had, which was scaling communications. And when it comes to employee engagement within a company, I think the number one thing that drives employee engagement at a company is clear and consistent communication. And there's things like Slack, which are good for doing projects and communicating with coworkers and that sort of thing. But it's super noisy, and if you're out for a week, and the CEO sent out a here's our Q2 plan and how we're going to get there, and you drop it in Slack. When you come back a week later, there's no chance you're going to see that. And so while we are big Slack power users ourselves, there's kind of this gap that's missing between what I'd say is like email and kind of always on communications. And so we thought about it from the perspective of, if you're the person sending out those messages, how do you get actionable feedback? How do you see that people on your team actually read and digested those important messages? If you're on the receiving end, how do you receive it in a way that is preferred by you? So that might be email, that might be SMS, that might be on Slack, that might be on Teams. Everyone kind of, especially at a lot of companies, I've mostly worked for companies where we sit behind a computer all day, but certainly there's a number of companies where people are out, working in a retail environment, or out in a field or a warehouse or other things like that, and sitting in front of the computer to receive an email is just not the way they get communicated to. And so we wanted to bring that sort of ability to engage, especially around the most important stuff at your company, to a variety of other companies as well. So that was kind of the impetus of it. A lot of the growth and scaling of challenges. Employee engagement, I would say, like at Flywheel, for example, was best in class, and still always on the employee engagement surveys, the number one thing that you could improve is employee communication. So that's really where we wanted to focus on with this next product. So that's a good question, Adam. Cool. Well, I think that's it. If anybody has any follow-ups, like I said, feel free to email me or hit me up on Twitter. And like I said, I'm pretty responsive. So I appreciate the time, everybody. And if you need anything, just let me know. Thanks.